when Yaakov was departing from them. So Yaakov wanted assurance that they would continue in the path of the Avot and in the understanding of monotheism, especially since it was such a pagan world, and that they were now living in Egypt. And Egypt was a very difficult civilization to maintain any ideas of monotheism or morality. So in order to reassure their father, they said, Shmah Yisrael, meaning, listen to us, Yisrael, our father. Hashem Elokeinu, the same God that's your God, is our God. Hashem Echad. And that this concept of Achdus Hashem, so to speak, of the monotheism, of the uniqueness, the oneness of God, that is paramount with us. So according to the Medrash, Yaakov responded by saying, Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuso L'Olam Voed. Blessed be the name of God forever and ever. So from that Medrash, we have the custom that when we say Shema, afterwards we say Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuso L'Olam Voed. Even though that does not appear in the Torah in this parsha. In this parsha, immediately after Shema, it says V'ohavta. There is no Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuso L'Olam Voed. But because of this tradition that we have from Yaakov Avinu, so therefore we have the custom to say it belachash, to say it silently. We don't want to omit it completely because Yaakov said it, yet we don't want to say it out loud because of the fact that it does not appear in the Torah. And therefore the compromise was and is to recite it silently, to recite it quietly. In the Beit HaMikdash, the Gemara teaches us that they did not say Amen, but rather they said Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuso L'Olam Voed. That was the response to the brachot, to the Shem Hashem. And therefore, as a reminder of that, because on Yom Kippur, perhaps more than any other day of the year, of the Jewish calendar, we remind ourselves of the temple service, of the Avodah and the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, on Yom Kippur, we recite it out loud. Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuso L'Olam Voed. The Meforshim also comment that based on another Medrash, that Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuso L'Olam Voed is the language of the angels in heaven, the Malachim. And on Yom Kippur, since we are then freed from our bodily constraints, so to a certain extent we resemble the Malachim, so therefore we can say the words that the Malachim in heaven say, Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuso L'Olam Voed. And Shema itself, so in the Torah, the ayin of Shema, the last letter, is written large. And the Dalet of Echad, at the end of the Pasuk, is also written large. So there are many comments to this. So the ayin and the Dalet together spell aid, meaning testimony, a witness. So this is how we, so to speak, bear witness to our faith in Hashem, that Hashem Elokeinu, the Lord is our God, and Hashem Echad, the Lord is one, and that is our testimony, that is our statement. And because of that, the Shmah Yisrael, that posuk itself, has become the basic posuk in Jewish life. So that we recite it at all life cycle events. We recite it Pamayim B'chol Yom B'Ahava. We recite it at the moment that one departs from the world as well. Because that is ultimately our basic belief and the testimony in everything that the Torah stands for, and our understanding of our relationship, Kaviyachol, to the Ribono Shel Olam. Now, because of this importance, so there is an emphasis placed on reciting and pronouncing the words correctly. So that should be an emphasis that exists throughout davening, throughout the Torah, is that we should pronounce the words correctly, grammatically. The only thing is that over the long exile of the Jewish people, many different dialects have been created, so that Hebrew is pronounced differently by different sections of Jews, depending upon where they came from and what influences they were subject to. Many times the influence is from the non-Jewish world. Well, how words were pronounced in the non-Jewish world, sounds were made, so then those sounds became sounds in Jewish life as well. So for instance, you'll hear Polish or Galician Jews that say, don't say lonu, they'll say loni or luni, if they're not sane. So where does that come from? Well, that comes because in that area of Poland, etc., that's the non-Jewish world, so the U became an E, and therefore in the vernacular that it changed, so then it changed by us too. And that became, for instance, cholam. How do you pronounce vav with a dot? So there are many different ways. The Germans pronounce it au. And the Lithuanians pronounce it o. And the Polish pronounce it oi. I know in Muncie there was a main thoroughfare called Route 306, and the Chassidim always used to say 306, because that's how they pronounce O. So what's the correct pronunciation? That's hard to fathom, and hard to know. And especially today when we have modern Hebrew with its pronunciations of the spoken language here in Eretz Yisrael. So then where does that play in? And we have v'ahavta et, v'ahavta es. So basically the Meforshim say that people should do what their fathers did, which is the safest way out. And however one was raised to pronounce, that's how one should pronounce. But we have certain things that are clear. For instance, shmah. So in the Ashkenazic pronunciation, we do not usually hear a difference between an aleph or an ayin. However, in the pronunciation of other groups in the Jewish people, the ayin is heard differently than the aleph. For instance, you hear our Baal Koreh on Shabbos, so you can hear when he says the ayin is not the aleph. So at the end of the ayin, there is like a nun sound. It's like ang. So many, I've heard it, many of the great Rosh Yeshiva and Rabbonim, for instance, say shmang, because they want to emphasize the ayin, that it has this sound of a nun to it. And we see that for instance, when we say Yaakov, so we say Yankel, because there somehow we retain the nun. We retain that pronunciation. And there are other examples of that. And then the Gemara says, regarding echod, the Gemara says, ma'arichin be'echod with the dalet. Now, how can you be marich in a dalet? How can you stretch a dalet? A dalet is duh. So in certain communities, they would say echad, to be marich in the dalet. But the majority of the Jewish people are marichin in the ches, echod. So there, we're not marich on the dalet. We don't stretch the dalet. We're stretching the ches, the cholam. The komets. So there is an interesting shita. Reb Shlomo Ibn Gabirol quotes this shita in a poem that he wrote. And he wrote that marichin be'echod kishiras hadvorim, like the buzz of the bees. So echod becomes echod zzz. The dalet has a Z to it. And therefore you can be marich in it. You can stretch it out because of the fact that now the dalet is not a hard dalet, so to speak, but it is kishiras hadvorim. It's like the buzz of the bees that can be stretched out. So in Litta there were many and I heard it from great people do it, who say echod because of this tradition that's recorded for us by Reb Shlomo Ibn Gabirol in one of his poems. But in any event, the posuk, the Shema Yisrael, has to be recited with a kavanah, has to be recited with great intent, to think what we are saying, and to realize that this is the ultimate declaration of the Torah and of Jewish faith. And therefore it remained that way throughout the ages, as being, so to speak, the one posuk. There's one, so you know the famous story that the Kloisenberger Rebbe came to a monastery after the Shoah that had Jewish children, and he wanted to know who were the Jewish children. And so he got up and he hollered, Shema Yisrael. And some children answered, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And he knew that those were the Jewish children that he would attempt to ransom and to save and to bring back into the fold.